Okay folks, in this video I'm going to be doing an oil change. I've got a 2000 Grand Prix. That's my daily driver. It's a Grand Prix GTP, if you know what that is. Supercharged little hot rod. Anyway, it got hit by a deer, or I hit a deer, or a deer ran into me earlier this year, so I got a different colored hood and fender on it right now, which I'll be painting later on this summer. Right now I'm going to do an oil change on it. No big spectacular deal, except for what I'd like to do is I'd kind of like to talk about oil and filters and stuff. A couple of years ago I had an oil change facility, and I've been a mechanic for, oh my God, a long time, 50 years. And in my experience, oil has been probably the most critical thing I can think of with an automobile. Now I'm a brand favorite. I've tried all kinds of different brands. When I had the oil change facility, I was convinced that all oils were the same, and at that point I started buying Kindle oil, and I was using just a cheap oil filter and stuff for the oil change facility, and started using it all in my own car and stuff like that. Well, as it turned out, I almost ruined my car. Almost. I started having some real engine issues and stuff like that, and I was going, oh my God, I'm about ready to blow my engine up or whatever. And I went back. I have always been a fan of Valvoline oil. Ever since my early days, years and years ago, and I've always used Valvoline oil until this little experience. And when I started having engine problems and stuff like that, I decided I'm going to change the oil, and I'm going to put some Valvoline oil in it. Because years ago I had an old GMC pickup that always had a valve rattle in it, and could never get rid of it. But I wound up, interesting enough, I started using a truck fleet oil in that engine, and it cleared up that problem. And so I know that oil has different viscosities, different deals and stuff, but some of them have different detergents and things in them that really has different effects on the engine and stuff. And so Valvoline's always been my go-to oil. I'm a die-hard Valvoline fan, 100%, even more so now than I ever have been. And so what I use now is I use the Valvoline high mileage stuff. In my engine I use 1030. Also, I got interested in a video a fella did here a while back, and I started watching it, where he tore apart a half a dozen or more oil filters and showed the differences in them. Well, I've always been a big fan of Fram oil filters until I watched that video, and seen what a Fram oil filter looks like inside, what a Wix oil filter looks like inside, what a Napa Gold oil filter looks like, a Purelator, and all these things. And so from that video, it taught me that although I was using, an oil filter and stuff, there was a lot of differences between the oil filters as well. And what it showed me was that the Napa Gold, the Wix, and the Purelator oil filters were superior by far to all the rest of the oil filters out there. And so now I'm pretty much, I'm a for sure die-hard Valvoline fan, and now I choose one of those three types of filters and stuff. They're more expensive, absolutely, but they're worth every damn penny of it and stuff. And as everybody knows, the cheapest maintenance that you can do on your engine is change the oil. Now, the other issue that I want to go into is how often you should change your oil. And what I have always been told is 3,000 miles. Well, the old engines and stuff like that, they had a lot more clearances, a lot more stuff to pass through the engines and stuff like that. And so that was an inevitable. You had to do them every 3,000 miles. Now the new engines have tighter clearances. There's a little bit different. You got better oils and things like that. But even still, there's one thing that hasn't changed with all of that. You have an internal combustion engine. And with internal combustion engines comes carbon. And carbon is the thing that dirties your oil. So it doesn't matter how efficient the engine is. It doesn't matter how close the tolerances are. It doesn't matter about any of those other things, because that carbon still gets down into the oil and dirties the oil, and it has to be filtered out, cleaned out, and that's why you have a filter. And that's why it's important to have a really good filter, is to clean out that carbon. And then get the oil changed when it starts getting that dirty deal. And so they say 10,000 miles on oil change and stuff, no freaking way, and heck, would I ever go 10,000 miles on an oil change? That's just ludicrous. There's no way that you can maintain a good, long-lasting, lifetime lasting engine on change the oil every 10,000 miles. That's just, excuse the terminology, but that's just stupidity thinking. There's just no logical thinking in that whatsoever. So, at worst, 5,000 miles. I never let my car go over 5,000 miles, and I try to change it about 3,000 to 3,500 miles religiously. By doing that, I get a lot of miles on my cars. I've put 500,000 miles on the same engine by changing my oil regularly, making sure it's always tuned up, running correctly, and driving it sensibly. If I'm going to run it really hard, I don't expect it to last a long time. But if I drive it sensibly and not run it real hard and keep my maintenance up on it, it's hard to say what I get. This Grand Prix I've got 170-some thousand miles on it. I've had it since it's had about 80 or 90,000 miles on it, I think. And I've done nothing to it other than just simple maintenance. Put an alternator on it, a water pump. I think maybe it started, but I may not have even put a start on it. It's been an extremely reliable vehicle. So, but I take care of it. I make sure it's always running right. If there's a problem with it, I take care of it. I don't let things go, because that's one of the other things. It doesn't take very long if an engine's misfiring for it to ruin an engine, because what you're doing is you're pushing harder on the valves, on the pistons. Things are not balancing out right. Things start getting all out of whack and doing all sorts of stuff, and that wears on an engine. So you want it to run very smoothly and stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to run those kind of things by you and stuff, because it is an important part of maintenance on an engine and stuff, and to make sure that your engines will last as long as they can, because nowadays, everything costs a dang much money. You want to make sure that you get the most life out of it as you can. Okay, so got the oil draining out here. So a couple things let's just throw at you here real quick. One of the things is your drain plug. You want to check a couple of things. If it has a seal on it, Now this one here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I'm going to get up here real close. This one has a rubber seal right in here. And that, you want to make sure that that's good. This one here looks real good. Some engines have a nylon seal on here. You want to make sure that that seal is good so you're not leaking out of there. The other thing is, make sure you clean this thing up really good before you put it back in. Sometimes you'll have shavings on this. This here is actually a magnet on the end of the bolt here. This is actually magnetic. It's a real light magnet, but you can just. But what it's meant to do is pick up shavings inside the engine. If you see stuff on this here, if you see a lot of stuff, better start getting your engine tore apart because it's going to fail real soon. So always keep an eye on that. The other thing is you want to make sure that you clean the surface up where it seats up against. Any of your surfaces where you take parts apart, I don't care what the part is, on an engine, you always want to make sure those surfaces are really, really clean when you put them back together. So that's if you go back in my videos, you'll find one on how to assemble parts and stuff, and I'll say it. I said it then, I'll say it again. Cleanliness is the secret to longevity with an automobile or anything mechanical as far as that goes. So be sure you clean everything up. Another thing I wanted to add on, I got thinking about it after I was talking about the oil and stuff like that, and there's two different kinds of oil. The oil products are made out of two different ways. There's what they call a paraffin-based oil, and then a oil-based oil. And paraffin-based oils is those have always been a no-no to me. I've torn apart a lot of engines, hundreds of engines, and inevitably every single engine I've ever torn apart that they use paraffin-based oil in, which is going to be Quaker State, Pennzoil, a lot of your aftermarket oils, all our paraffin-based oils. Inevitably, those engines has always been filthy inside. Had a lot of carbon buildup. Thus, paraffin-based. What's paraffin? It's wax. Stuff gets stuck into wax, and so it doesn't allow things to flow freely through it. Whereas oil-based oils allow stuff to just continue to flow through, and they don't put that coating on the engine that collects dirt. And so, you know, those oils, you know, Valvoline has excellent cleansing detergents in it and stuff. There's a few other engine oils out there that are pretty good. Valvoline. Seems like anything that ends in lean is pretty good in my book. You know, you have some other stuff out there. I haven't really done a whole lot of work with too much. Is like Redline. You know, AMSOIL is a pure synthetic oil and stuff. You know, I've done some research on synthetic oils and conventional oils and stuff like that, and really the big difference is the viscosity in synthetic oils. It'll last longer, but we're back to that 5,000 mile oil change thing. If you're changing your oil every 5,000 miles, the viscosity doesn't really matter that much. So I mean that's you know, half a dozen one dozen the other. Does it lubricate better? Maybe. That's why I like the high mileage oil, because it's a synthetic blend of oil. It doesn't cost the, you know, $10, $12 a quart of the synthetic, but it gives me the good qualities and stuff. So I've been real happy with the high mileage oil. So it looks like we're about done here draining oil. That's just one of the main things. I mean, if you're a Jiffy Lube person, stop. That's one thing I can tell you. Go to a Valvoline shop, have them change your oil. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm getting endorsed by Valvoline or anything. I'm just a true Valvoline believer. Pure and simple. Just pure and simple. I'm not talking bad about Jiffy Lube because they're a bad outfit. I'm talking bad because they use Pennzoil. And when I have my oil change shop, customer come in, I just lift the cap off their engine, I look at her and says, "Oh, you've been using Jiffy Lube," and they look at me and go, "How did you know?" It's very simple. Your engine's filthy inside. And so, you know, I made a lot of true believers, I believe, at that point, about the difference in the oils and stuff. So, anyway, we're going to move on here. I got to find the oil filter on this thing, get that off, get it cleaned up, and get her filled up with oil. I did notice I got a little problem with the power steering hose under here, so it looks like I might be addressing that too as well today. So anyway, okay, so one other quick little tip here. For me, I got the Pure Later Boss filter for this rig, but when putting that oil filter back on, what you always want to remember is to put a little film of grease on the rubber seal. That way the next time when you go to tear it apart, it comes apart easily. Of course, you want to clean up your surface to where the oil filter goes and stuff, but putting a film of grease on the seal makes it easier to take apart. I like using just a regular old multi-purpose grease. Some people use oil. I've used oil before. Some use lithium grease, all sorts of different stuff. But you know, the important part is to get a oily film on the rubber seal. That way, when it comes to taking it off, you're not sitting there with a chisel and a screwdriver trying to beat the damn filter off. I have been in situations where people have put them on dry and it was not fun. I've had to use chisels to get oil filters off and everything else. So a little bit of grease will save you a whole lot of grief. So with that, let's get this on. Oh, the other thing is when you tighten down your oil filter, you want to take it down snug and then just kind of give it a little bit, about a quarter of a turn or so, and don't go any further with it, because that's the other thing. If you get too tight with them, then that can cause a problem too. Then after you start the engine, double check and just make sure it's good and sealed. So a quarter to a half a turn is usually about all you need. Good and firmly tight, but not torqued on. So anyway, we're going to get some oil in this thing and fire her up, and let's see what happens. Okay, I wanted to just show you real quick here. Now this, I don't know how well you can see that, but I think that you can see it fairly good. Let's get in here, see if you can see it. This is the oil cap to my Grand Prix, and as you can see, I haven't cleaned this off or anything. When I first got this car, they had been using Jiffy Lube, and it was kind of dirty, and so I started using Valvoline oil in it and stuff. And since then, it has cleaned it up quite a bit. So that, you know, that it's, like I said, this is not an endorsement for Valvoline, but I stand behind it 100%. Now, if Valvoline wants to send me, you know, thousands of dollars, hey, I have no problem with that. And I'll just kiss their butt forever. But they are a good oil, and I stand by them, have for years, and wandered away from it and always came back. And believe me, I won't go anywhere else now. But, well, I think this thing's ready to start. Let's let her rip. Another little tip, when you first start your engine after an oil change, do not rev your engine. Just let it start and idle. Let it build up its oil pressure and stuff. You start it, after changing oil, rev the engine. That is not good. You're going to do major damage to your engine real fast. So, start it, let it idle, build up oil pressure. Make sure everything's not leaking. Good deal. Alright, recheck the oil, make sure she's full. I'm about 99% sure this one is. Nice thing about those 5-quart deals is, bam, right on the money. Well, that ends another video from Oregon Hot Rod. Appreciate you guys showing up, watching the video, and please subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. If I'm being an ass, let me know, you know. So anyway, take care. I'll see you later.